papers where I got this idea, this method. So if you know, I'm very eager to give credit where credit is due. I just don't know where it came from anymore. But about myself, my name is Int'l. I work at Seoul National University of Education. It's on line number 3. There is a university there. It's not just a subway stop. But a lot of people, I tell them, I work at Seoul National, I work at KOTESOL. Oh, where? No, at KOTESOL. There's actually a university there. I work in a KOTESOL Teacher Training Certificate Program. So our students take 200 hours of classes in the semester. We meet for 3 hours, a couple different days a week, which when I first started doing that was pretty intense. 3 hours straight of class. But I've also been a teacher for 7 or 8 years or so. A lot of that I did actually test preparation and kindergarten, early elementary education. So of course, right? Like hand in glove. Those go right together. But I enjoy both of them. But I say that because this is a method that I, like I said, learned during my graduate studies, but I developed and refined through use. So this is something I've actually found effective, which is why I wanted to share it this morning with you all. So the goal is teaching young learners. To teach young learners, age 6 to 12, and very young learners, 2 to 5, in a way that is communicative, a way that is engaging, that actually they're participating in and find interesting, and a way that is meaningful. Not just going through exercises, but there's meaningful learning going on, meaningful communication happening. Okay? And last of all, of course, it's got to be enjoyable. I don't know where the dichotomy came from that education has to be not enjoyable, but it doesn't apply in general, I think, and it especially doesn't apply to young learners. So a half solution that's really popular these days is teaching storybooks. But storybook reading is very often teacher-centered. You know, the teacher reads, the students listen. It's also mechanical. Usually the limit of student participation is read and repeat. Read and repeat. And in the end, it's non-productive. Apart from often answering some very basic, simple questions, oftentimes yes-no questions, the students don't really speak. So maybe they learn some comprehension skills, but there's no real participation, there's no production. The students don't get to say much. So the challenge here is teaching the young learners effectively. Because young learners don't really respond well to discussion-based activities. And this presentation is more about second grade and under, like early elementary school. You can't tell 4 8-year-olds to sit around and discuss what their favorite thing was that they did this weekend. Or, you know, what did you do after school yesterday? You know, they don't really just sit around and talk about stuff, ever. You know, in life or in class. They also don't respond well to direct instruction. And lastly, they become bored quickly and easily with things that don't hold their interest. So a solution is storybook-based learning. Storybooks are, seems obvious, write this down, they're based on a story. But this is important because stories are one of the most prolific and oldest ways of transmitting knowledge and educating. You know, before the written word, stories transferred orally were the main method of education. So there's something inherently in us that responds to a good story. Okay? They also present language in a natural context. I will say not all storybooks do this, but the good ones do. You know? Storybooks also provide meaningful, comprehensible input. Okay? They provide as it is a story that the students can understand if chosen for the correct proficiency level. And so there's a natural desire to understand what's going on. And stories can, it says, are inherently interactive. I would say can be inherently interactive. But if you've ever worked with young learners, you know that everything is interactive. Everything is participatory. Whether you want it to be or not. They will be participating, interacting with you. Alright, so the benefits of using storybooks. By reading, hearing, and telling stories, we naturally integrate reading, listening, and speaking, just like real life. In fact, storytelling and discussion is a real life activity. It also develops, the method I want to present, develops both linguistic and cognitive skills. Oftentimes, as language teachers, we think only of developing our students' linguistic knowledge or abilities. But we forget that young learners don't know how to do a lot of things that we take for granted. You know, they don't know how to tell a story. They don't know how to organize and present their ideas clearly. So this method helps them do that as well. And using a storybook to teach allows for production of controlled and creative output by students. This basically means it allows students to speak, to practice speaking in a way that has some controls, within the confines of telling a story, but also allows them to be creative. This means we don't just require the students to mechanically reproduce the text of the story, but tell the story and talk about the story in their own words. Alright, and lastly, it teaches the students to be active rather than passive learners. This method that I'll share with you now. Okay, so here are the 7 steps to the method. They're on the handout. If you didn't get it in the back, I suggest you get it now. Go ahead, because it has these 7 steps laid out. In the order as they appear here, so you can take notes for each step. I will go over these more thoroughly in the next few slides, but this is the overall method here. Some pre-reading, visual preview, looking at the book. The teacher reads, then the students read. Please grab the handout if you just got in. You read together, then the students tell the story, and then number 7 is a review. In the next class, you have the students tell the story again. So we progress from teacher control to total student control by the end. Alright, so even though there's 7 steps on the page, there's actually a step 0, and that is choosing the right storybook. Okay, choosing the right book is crucial. It's so important. There are so many bad storybooks out there. And I mean really bad. There's storybooks that are just pages of words that they have a purpose, but they are not a story. They're not a storybook. There are storybooks that are thinly veiled teachings of a grammar point. And they are so boring. They're so boring for the kids. They just repeat a structure over and over again in slightly different contexts, and then the book is done. And that has no interest for students. So a good storybook, okay, this is very important again, has a story. Alright? A good storybook has a story. Not all storybooks have a story. That's why you can't assume that this is going to be true. A story, as you might know, has a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's a progress to it. Something happens. A story is not just 12 pages of facts. Okay? It's not just 12 pages of the same grammatical structure used again and again. Okay? A good storybook is appropriate for your students' age level and level of proficiency. This is also very important, that we pick books that the subject matter makes sense to your students. And the content of the book is not too difficult. In my experience, Storybooks accelerate in their complexity very quickly. You know, storybooks that you might have read as a child, if your native language is English, if you look back at them, the language is actually quite complex because they're assuming a lot of times a 7 or 8-year-old level of English proficiency, native speaker level. And for example, this book here is called First Grade Friends, Recess Mess, which is the one we'll talk about. It's designed to be a reader, so the content is a bit simpler. The sentences are simpler. That doesn't mean it's boring or uninteresting for students, in fact. But you do want to be very careful not to select a text that is too difficult for students to understand. Okay, and a good storybook is also short enough to read in one sitting. This is important for keeping especially young students' attention because as you'll see with this method, it's not something you can really break up over a 50-page book. This method, yeah, it has a limit to the lower band of difficulty and shorter books, but if you have a book that's short enough to read in one sitting, I think that helps the students also to encapsulate the whole story and not have it be broken up too much into chunks. Alright, so that's step 0. And, I almost missed this, but this is very important. A good storybook provides good visual support for the text. The younger you get, the more you need visual support. The pictures have to tell the story because the readers don't understand the text and they might not understand what you're saying. So, for example, this is the book we'll be using today. The pictures are very vivid. You could understand the entire story without knowing the text. That's ideal. What's not ideal, I had a student teach a book the other day. It was something called Pigeon Rides the Bus, or Pigeon Wants to Drive the Bus. Pigeon Wants to Drive the Bus. It's a great book. It was really funny and clever. The problem is, the student was trying to teach it as a beginner book, and almost every page is just a picture of Pigeon with a dialogue bubble, and Pigeon saying something clever. So almost every page has exactly the same image on it, which is death if you're trying to teach, very young learners or beginners. Because then it's all dependent on the auditory input, what they hear. So, I really like this series, the Scholastic Reader series. It's also, they've got another one, Hello Reader. This is for grade 1 here, but they have stuff that goes even lower. And I like this series, but even that said, to meet all these criteria, only about a third or a quarter of the books in this series really meet this criteria. It's not that the others aren't usable, but the best really usable ones are only a third or a quarter of these. And this is the best series I've seen. So you really got to be picky and selective. Starting with a good book will make all the difference when you're teaching a story to young learners. Any questions yet? You can ask a question at any time, okay? Alright, good. Alright, so, speaking of the visual, let's look at the cover of this story. In a way, the cover of the book tells the story, which is beautiful for young learners, really young learners. You don't want to keep them guessing or make it unclear or ambiguous. So this story, what's the title of this story? Recess Mess. So here, the content, recess. Kids know about recess. They like recess. It's their favorite class. And then we have mess, another word they probably don't know, but they can easily understand, and is useful for them to know. So what do you think this story is about?
A little boy wants to use the bathroom.
Yeah, a little boy who needs to go to the bathroom. Okay? Don't worry, it's not too graphic or anything. But yeah, this is content kids can understand. Right? Maybe adults can understand this even too. But, I mean, just look at the cover. You can understand, basically, oh, the story's going to be about him needing to go to the bathroom and he has some problem. So already the students have the big picture. Very helpful when their proficiency is really low. Alright, good. So we know recess mess is about a boy who needs to go to the bathroom at some point. Okay? Oh, yes, there he is, in case anyone was unsure. Alright, so step one, the pre-reading discussion. This is probably pretty familiar, pretty simple stuff. The teacher briefly asks the students some questions about the topic of the book with visual support, but not actually talking about the book yet. Okay? So for recess mess, you might talk about, what do you like to do outside for fun? When you go to a playground, what do you like to do? The skills this acts on is it activates their previous knowledge of the topic. It gets students ready to talk and participating in the reading. It gets them ready to go and gets them participating. So they're kind of warmed up. This step, very brief, just a minute or two. Okay, just getting them warmed up, just getting their background knowledge flowing. Step two is what you could call the visual preview. Because for this step, and this is a really important step, you cover up the text of the story and you show the whole story without the text. So the students are looking at the pictures and talking about the pictures without the story. And you stop at each page to give the students a chance to say what they see. But don't have them tell the story yet. Okay? This is not guess what the story is about, try to tell the story before you read it. It's just look at the pictures. Because students can pick up a lot more just by visually observing than they realize. You know, we have a tendency to train students to be dependent on the teacher for information. And then we wonder, you know, why they can't figure out what's going on for themselves when they watch a video or the teacher is speaking or read a book. This makes the students active learners. This makes them use their observation skills and their predictive skills to start to think about what's going on in the story and realize they can get input not just by hearing or reading. They can get input by observing what's going on. Okay? And it also, notice this is a cognitive skill. Right? They're starting to think about what the story might be about. They're starting to predict. They're connecting visual information with what they might hear later. Okay? They're seeing that they can guess, which is a skill, as you probably know, a lot of your students sorely lack. They've never really been taught how to guess or be encouraged to guess in a productive way. Alright, step 3, the teacher reads. This is a step that is more familiar. I encourage teachers to do it a little differently though. Read the entire book all the way through without stopping. Okay? Read the entire book all the way through without stopping. The teacher doesn't elicit participation, but just lets the students take in the story. This gives them whole language exposure. It gives them a chance to try to process the story on their own without guidance. Again, making them more active in their own learning. They may not really process that much, but that's not the goal here. The goal is not that they would get the whole story the first time, but they would be exposed to it. Another thing I would say here is if you as the teacher can basically memorize the text and just show them the pictures and say the story, it's better if they're not trying to read while you are reading to them. This is almost more like this is more of a listening activity, right? And it's not a problem to mix the skills like that. Yes?
What would you say if you're in a situation where you have to take several class sessions to finish the story? Would you still read the whole story to them, or would you just read that first section?
Well, this story would take about 3 minutes to read all the way through.
Right, but if you didn't
Yeah.
if you had a different story which was much longer.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta adjust to your situation, right? You could break the story in half.
Yeah,
Or
or would you
thirds.
say, like for this step, when a teacher has to read the whole thing, do you think it's more beneficial to read the whole story that's going to take 3 or 4 class sessions?
I see what you're saying. Yeah, in that case, I would, treat each section separately.
Each day section.
Yeah, each section separately. Because, a lot of young learner classes are only half an hour,
Yeah.
Maximum 40 minutes, some 50 minutes. But this whole method does not need to be done in one class period. I would say it's more realistic that it would take 2 class periods. And I'll show you where the ideal break in the process would be. Okay. This is another area, I forgot to mention this previously, but PowerPoint can be a beautiful thing. You can scan the entire book, you can cover up the text, and you can just show the pictures on PowerPoint. I personally prefer to sit in a circle on the floor with the kids. What can I say? But if you can't do that, that's one great thing about PowerPoint, is you can just block out the text. Another great thing about PowerPoint, and I would encourage you all, even with regular books, to do this, is you don't have to read every page. It's a secret. You don't have to read every page if you don't want to. In fact, even in this book, I found that there's a couple of pages where it shows the kids doing their thing on the playground that is not really necessary to the story. And I found when I go through that, it tends to lose the students' attention. So, high-tech tip, you just tape the pages together that you want to skip, and look, hey, we went from this page to this page. Even better with PowerPoint, they don't even know what they're missing. So feel free to modify the text. Even if you have a good book with good pictures, and the text is way too complex, just rewrite it. Rewrite the book with simpler text, and then throw it up on the PowerPoint, and nobody will ever be the wiser. Okay? So you have options. Don't feel like you're limited to just reading it as it's written. Alright, so that's the read the whole story. It'll just take a couple of minutes, surprisingly shorter than you think. Okay, and then step 4 is the students read. Alright, the teacher has the students take turns reading a few sentences, 1 to 3 sentences at a time. The 1 to 3 sentences is, you want to have them read a whole unit of thought. Like, if one sentence is, "No," said Tommy, that's kind of incomplete. Have them read a couple sentences that represents a whole unit of thought, not just a strictly grammatical one sentence. And then stop and discuss the content a little bit. But do not feel like you have to discuss every single word of every single page and explain every single grammatical construction. I have one student right now in the program, God bless her, but she wants to teach every single word on every single page of every single thing she teaches. And she just has a very hard time letting go of that. But, keep it central to the story. The thing I always point out to her is, when you read the newspaper, do you hold yourself to that standard? Do you have to understand every single word you read? No. When you watch some drama, do you rewind it every single time you don't quite understand one sentence? You drive yourself insane if you did that. That's not the way we read in real life. So we don't have to feel like we have to make students read that way. In fact, I would think if you make students read that way, you're just increasing their anxiety about their own independent reading in the future. I've heard that time and time again from students, adult students, that they don't find much pleasure in reading because they feel like they have to dissect every single thing they read and look up every single word they don't know, rather than learning the skill of separating out the important from the optional as they read. So this reinforces that thinking in your students, that I could read, I just need to read enough to understand, which is obviously an important target for English language learners to have. Skills, this hits on pronunciation, word and sentence stress. That's why you have the students read. So you can check their pronunciation and sentence stress, but not too much. You know, don't do any of this to death. You know, that's really key with young learners. Don't do it to death. You know, you'll teach them next week, and you can catch something different then. Comprehension checking, obviously. Target vocabulary, the reason I connected this with problem solving and critical thinking is you don't just provide a translation of every word they don't know. You don't just provide even an English definition. If there's a word they don't know, get them to figure out and guess what it might mean. Get them to wrestle with it. Well, what do you think? For example, if it says swings, and you're talking about a playground. It says, Tommy was on the swings, and they say, I don't know swings. Well, look at the picture. What do you think might be the swing in that picture? And have them guess. You know, only as a last resort would you tell them, or if it's something really complicated. You know, you might want to tell them. But in general, again, encourage their active participation. Encourage them to become active learners. You know, as a teacher, in general, you want to try to work yourself out of a job, right? You want to try to get them to the point where they can learn on their own. And man, if you start with the kids when they're young, that's why I love teaching kids. Because they don't know that they can't learn on their own yet. You know, they don't know they're not supposed to make mistakes. You know, they don't know 10,000 vocabulary words they can't use. You know, I had a high school student once, and he came to class, and this was at a boarding school, and he forgot his textbook. And I said, "Where's your book?" And he said, "Oh, it's in my quarters, my chamber, my residence, and I said, "In your room?" "Yeah, in my room." He had all these words like log jammed in his head. But young learners, they don't, you know? They don't know there's supposed to be 10 different words for room, you know? They just need to learn room first. So that's one thing I enjoy about young learners. Alright, so the students read. This will take the longest. This is definitely the longest step. And so don't be afraid to take some time on this. But again, don't drag it out. You know, it's an art. If you're losing the kids, then it's time to move on. And don't sweat it. Alright, and here's the break point in the procedure, which is an optional class activity. Okay, at this point is a good point to break because they just had the heaviest step. So it's a good time to take a break from the book, do some activity related to the story to check their comprehension of key vocab or key phrases in the book. Or if they're really young, just handwriting. You know, with kindergarten, preschool kids, you might just have them practice writing the words that they just learned. You might have them do something active to show you the meaning of the vocabulary words they just learned. So there's different things you can do here. I won't give too much guidance here. Okay, but this is a good breaking point. This is also a good point to break for the next class. You know, if you're going to break this up over 2 class periods. In fact, what I would typically do is start with some kind of song or dance, do up to this point, and then some kind of closing song or dance activity, then come back to it the next day. This is a good point to do that. Because yeah, if you go through all 7 steps in one sitting, it can be a little overwhelming. But the benefit of this method that you'll notice is you go through the entire book 3, 4, or 5 times. So they know the book. You know, so often storybook reading is the teacher reads, the students repeat, ask some simple questions, and then you're done. And the students don't remember anything. Because there was never reinforcement. You know? So, step 5, now is the read and repeat, the classic read and repeat. But I will point out that the read and repeat has a very specific purpose. Okay? Read and repeat does not check comprehension. Okay? Let's see. Everybody say this with me. 我爱你. 我也爱你. Alright, you guys just learned some Chinese. Congratulations. Right? Everybody learned some Chinese? No, right? All you did was repeat sounds that came out of my mouth. Your students repeating the sounds that come out of your mouth, you know what that shows? It shows that they can repeat the sounds that came out of your mouth. It doesn't show that they know those words. It doesn't show that they understand the story. But, pronunciation, word stress, fluency in speech, the flow of speech over a sentence, those are all important things. Okay, these are all important things. But they cannot be the main comprehension checking activity. Alright, so that's the read and repeat. Relatively short step. But again, if the students stumble over a phrase, go over it once or twice more. But don't feel like you have to do too much here. One good thing about this method I found is no one step takes too long. And if you miss something in one step, it's okay, because you're kind of going to pick up, you're going to pick it up a little bit later. Okay, so that's step 5, read and repeat. Then step 6, this is the really important step, and which I almost never seen any teachers do, which is have the students tell the story. Okay, step 5, in a way, refreshes their memory of the entire story. Because you read and repeat through the whole thing. Step 4 was very much breaking down the story into pieces. Step 5 refreshes their memory of the whole story. And then step 6, they tell the story. Again, the text is covered. Okay, so they're not relying on the text. And I would really emphasize, this is not about the students repeating verbatim, repeating word by word the text. Again, that doesn't prove comprehension. When I was a kid, my parents thought I could read at the tender age of 2 because when we would read a storybook, I would read the pages. But really, I had just memorized the book. And now my daughter does the same thing. When I'm putting her to bed and I'm reading a book and I try to skip a line, because I want to get her to bed a little sooner. Hey, how come you didn't say she knows the entire story line by line? How come you didn't say Strega Nona did this or that? She even catches single words I try to skip. It's really frustrating. I'm trying to get her to bed a little earlier. Kids can do this, but that's not the point. The point is they tell the story. Another caveat here is when you're retelling the story, you want them to tell a story, not just say what happens on each page. The kids went to recess. Sam had to go to the bathroom. Sam went to the bathroom. That's a retelling of the facts of the story, but you want to try to push towards telling the story. One day, Sam and his friends were playing. Sam suddenly had to go to the bathroom. He looked for a bathroom and he found, try to help them tell it more like a story. That might be harder for really young learners, so don't push it too much. But for a little older learners, they can start to do that. So it's emphasizing telling the story over remembering every detail of the text, and it helps the students organizing their thoughts. If you ask a young learner, a child, to tell you a story, what do they typically do in your experience? Do they tell you the nice chronological sequencing of the events of the story? What do they do?
Most interesting.
Yeah, they tell you the part that was most interesting to them. And they usually prioritize it that way. Most to least interesting part of the story. In fact, so usually you get the ending first, and then something that happened midway through that was maybe not even related to the story at all. Oh, the girl went down the slide. That was just one picture in the story. It didn't really have anything to do with anything. But that's what they'll tell you. Okay, so this helps them develop the storytelling skill. In fact, I'm sure we all know adults who can't tell a nice, concise story. So maybe they could benefit from this method too. But we forget very often how young learners haven't yet learned the skills that we take for granted, and that we need to teach them those skills. And again, short sentences are good. Short sentences are good. Not repeating the exact form of the story. All right, and then last, step 7, the students tell the story again in the next class. Just like the previous step, but of course this reinforces long-term learning. A lot of research shows that reviewing just jumps up long-term learning by a huge %. I think that if you don't review something you've learned, you'll remember maximum, I think, like 10%. But if you review just a day later or a couple hours later, it jumps to like 20, 30, even higher %. So this reinforcing of the long-term learning is really helpful for the students. All right, so there's the method again. Notice, traditional storybook reading is basically only number 3 and number 5. But with this method, you get a much more well-rounded learning of the storybook. All right? I'm not actually done. We're going to go through the method, but I want to ask if there's any questions at this point. Okay, so you are all first graders now. All right, congratulations. You made it to first grade. And we're going to read a story called Recess Mess. Again, Scholastic Reader Series, Hello Reader, great books. Highly recommend them. Okay, so in our pre-reading, we would ask the students, related specifically to this book, who likes to play outside? Duh, right? It's not bad to start with a gimme question that everyone can answer and get excited about. What do you like to do? What do you guys like to do when you play outside? Run, okay? Skip. Skip, another skipper. Okay, can you show us? No, I mean, in class you would really do that, right? Like get the students excited. Do you like to play at school? Come on, right? All right. And where do you play outside at school?
By the trees.
By the trees. Maybe. How about this? Oh yeah, what's that? That's a playground, right? Who likes the playground? Woohoo! Yeah, my daughter loves the playground now. I have eyes for playgrounds I never had before. Okay, so pre-reading introduce the idea of recess, and then you'll go to the picture. Okay, here's the book we're going to read today. Just show the cover. What's it say? Recess Mess. And who knows what recess is? Probably nobody will, because it's an uncommon word. So you say, when you're at school, then you hear the bell, then yay, you run outside and play. Right? That's recess. Okay, that's recess. And then mess, you can make a mess, and show them visually. So this book is called Recess Mess. Now, what do you see in the picture? What do you see in the picture? Two happy kids, and is he happy? No, what's wrong? Then you hear, pee-pee teacher, pee-pee. Right? And you say, yeah, and then actually the most important phrase that I find you teach in this book is, I've got to go pee. I got to go pee. Because that's really useful for them, actually. So go pee. All right, he's got to go pee. And I have them repeat that. He's got to go pee. And then invariably one student says, I got to go pee. Okay, you can go. Alright, so they understand the title and the cover, helps them predict. Okay, and then we go through each page of the book, saying, what do you see here? Not telling the story. What do you see? Okay, I see a teacher. I see students.
Reading.
What are the students? Yeah, they're reading. What else are they doing? What are these guys doing over here? Yeah, cleaning. Good. Yeah, kind of cleaning. Call it putting away the books. All right. And then, oh, what are they doing now? Put on their clothes. Okay, good. I'm going to go through this a little more quickly for time's sake. What are they doing here? Line up. They're getting in line. And then, what are they doing? It's recess time. Right? They're going out to play. I'll just show you the story, and you can see how easy it is to understand what's going on. Kid's playing. He jumps. He stops. Okay? And then, here's the dilemma. What's the problem, do you think? He doesn't know which one to go to. See, you can understand the whole story without reading. And then, you could give a little light bulb, right? And then, oh. So the students, they'll see this and they'll kind of understand, but they won't quite put it all together, usually. And then he's happy. I don't know why he's eating milk and drinking milk and eating cookies, but then he shows the words that he learned. Okay, so you go through it like that, and then, again, step 3, the teacher reads the whole story. The students have a chance to hear the story, and again, leave the text out of the reading. So, let's see, timekeeper, how much time do we have?
You have 10 minutes.
Sorry?
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay. Let's see. So, all right, I'll do this. Sam, Dan, Pam, Kim, Max, and Jan put away books as fast as they can. They put on coats. They get in line. They go outside. It's recess time! Woo-hoo. You're in first grade, remember? Okay. Dan runs. Pam rolls. And I skipped a couple pages. Dan throws. Pam catches. Kim skips. Sam jumps. Sam stops. Sam looks for the boys' room. He needs to go. He sees 2 doors, but wait, oh no! Sam has never used this room before. Sam tries to read what's on the door to add some action to help aid the pictures. B-O-Y? G-I-R-L? But Sam can't read, and Sam can't spell. What should Sam do? And some students will answer at this point. What should Sam choose? Sam gets an idea to help him choose. Sam will wait and wait some more for a boy or a girl to come out of the door. Now Sam, relieved sigh. Now Sam is happy. Sam feels swell. He knows how to read, and he knows how to spell. What can he spell? Boy, B-O-Y, and G-I-R-L. What's that? Boy and girl. All right, so good for Sam. Okay, then we'll have the students read. Again, 1 to 3 sentences, ask some concept checking, but remember this step can take a while, so don't feel a need to explain everything. Okay, I'm just going to zip right through this because I know you all can read. But again, help them with pronunciation a little bit, help them understand just the key things. play Simon Says. Simon says, put on your jacket. And then they act it out. Simon says, skip rope. And then, and then of course you have to do, Simon says, you gotta go pee. Right? I love that, Okay, then the read and repeat. Again, don't let it drag on, but go sentence by sentence. Okay, checking their pronunciation as you go. And then last, students will tell the story. But again, students don't need to use the same words as the book. In fact, it's kind of better not to, in a way. Because you don't want to reinforce this idea that the only correct answer is the text of the book. Okay? So, and for this one I actually cut out a few pages. Because when I do this, I would typically say, is this page important? No. Do we have to say this page? No. But focus on telling the story. So, the first page here, the kids go outside to play. Okay? And you don't even have to use recess. The kids go outside to play. Sam has to go pee. Sam goes to the bathroom, but he can't read. What do I do? I know what to do. I have an idea. This is a good I have an idea page. Sam waits for a boy. Sam is happy. Sam can read boy and girl. That's it. That's the story. Okay? And then repeat the next class. So this method in conclusion, as you can see, is highly interactive. Okay? The students are very much participating. It coincides with one of the most ancient educational methods, storytelling. Everybody loves a good story, especially kids. It's memorable. You couldn't go through this book that many times without remembering at least a couple things, even the most non-participatory students. And it gives the students a model for production. There's a story to tell, there's parameters, but it allows for them to use language creatively. Within the story, they can tell the story as they like. They can talk about the actions they see happening. So it's guided, but it also allows some freedom. Okay, and I think, that's it. So, any questions now about this? Yes?
I have a pre-kindergarten class where I teach the same.
Sorry?
I have a pre-kindergarten class
Okay.
and I teach the same storybook 4 days a week for 6 weeks. Do you have any suggestions for how I can adapt some of these ideas?
Wow. No. Yeah, that's pretty rough. I would say just supplement like crazy. Just repeat the steps in a sense. Make a lot of extra activities. I've been in similarly impossible situations. And it's just really tough.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, make a lot of anything even remotely related to the story. Have a spelling quiz. Match pictures with words from the book. It's very hard to be put in a situation like that. Or just bring in another book. Once you've covered stuff thoroughly, feel free to bring in outside material. At least that's what I think.
Thank you.
Time's up. But if anyone has a question, I'll stay until I'm asked to leave.